Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lital Shemesh, and coming up in today's newscast, Lion's Den terrorists surrender to Palestinian Authority in fear of Israeli reprisal. Israeli Defense Minister Gantz arrives in Turkey to renew landmark security cooperations. And Israel and Lebanon follow through on signing their maritime border agreement. Israel intensifies security campaign in Judea and Samaria with major success this morning as members of the new Lion's Den terror group reportedly turning themselves into authorities. ILTV's Aaron Porris with the details.
Palestinian sources reporting Thursday morning that Mahmoud al-Banna and at least 3 other top commanders from the Lion's Den Palestinian terror group giving themselves up to PA security forces in Nablus Wednesday night in fear that the IDF plans to assassinate them. The Palestinian Authority then preparing to transfer the terror leaders to protective custody in Jericho prison. The surrender coming just days after a major uptick in IDF operations against the terror group, which is responsible for a string of deadly attacks against Israeli soldiers and civilians in recent months. On Tuesday morning alone, Israeli soldiers killing the group's leader as well as several other militants and both injuring and arresting dozens more. On top of the Israeli military pressure, however, sources saying that the Palestinian Authority likewise bearing down on the young terror group as the continued attention on the factions sharply interfering with Nablus residents' livelihoods and regional economic activities. That said, the surrender also not an end to the terror group per se, with analysts saying that it could be days or even weeks before the remaining members are arrested or persuaded to follow their commander's suit. Additionally, the Palestinian pressure on Lion's Den isn't necessarily all that strong, as sources are saying Israel and other international parties, including the United States, are largely pushing for the PA to make such moves, while many in the Palestinian Authority are actually praising the terror group's actions in recent weeks. One group member, Tamar El-Sabi, even given a job at the PA security forces in return for leaving the Lion's Den.
Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz making headlines with an historic visit to Ankara today, meeting Turkish President Erdogan. ILTV Aaron Porris continues.
Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz is in Ankara today to meet with his Turkish counterpart Hulusi Akar, as well as Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. This is the first time in over a decade that there has been an official meeting between the defense ministers of Israel and Turkey, and the trip beginning with Gantz visiting the mausoleum of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the first president of Turkey, where Gantz laid a wreath. Also, the meeting marking another step in a years-long process that has seen the country slowly returning towards full diplomatic relations after over a decade of strained ties. Last month, for example, for the first time in a decade, a Turkish warship anchoring at an Israeli port. And also last month, Prime Minister Yair Lapid meeting with Turkish President Erdogan on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly's high annual level meeting. It was the first such meeting between an Israeli premier and the Turkish leader since 2008. That discussion coming just over a month as well, after the two leaders holding a phone call and agreeing to move forwards with the full restoration of ties and to return ambassadors to one another's capitals, ending years of antagonism that largely surrounded Israel's relationship with the Palestinians. Renewed defense ties between Jerusalem and Ankara, meantime, were said to have been made possible after Turkish authorities managed to foil a series of attacks by Iranian cells which were planning to assassinate and/or kidnap Israeli tourists in Istanbul in late July. Still, ahead of the trip, Israeli officials saying that they did not expect any weapons deals being signed between the sides, and the relationship was building in, quote, measured and careful steps, especially as the official also noting the sensitive ties that Israel has with Turkish rivals Cyprus and Greece. Defense ties were once a mainstay of Israel's relations with Turkey before they unraveled as diplomatic ties soured following the Mavi Marmara flotilla incident of 2010.
President Yitzhak Herzog is today concluding his visit to Washington following yesterday's White House summit with U.S. President Joe Biden. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz with details.
The White House meeting came just days before the Knesset election and the congressional midterms, and a political climate was certainly present. Addressing the elephant in the room at the start of the White House meeting, President Herzog reportedly said the U.S.-Israel relationship must remain above politics. Herzog reportedly told Biden, "We have Knesset elections, you are having midterms in the U.S. But one thing is clear. Our friendship, our strong bond, transcends all political differences and opinions and parties." President Biden reminded the Israeli president that he has been a true supporter of Israel for decades.
We're also going to discuss the ironclad commitment, and this is, I'll say this 5,000 times in my career, the ironclad commitment the United States has to Israel based on our principles, our ideas, our values. They're the same values. And I've often said, Mr. President, if there were not an Israel, we'd have to invent one.
You are a true friend of Israel, Mr. President, and the United States is our closest, strongest historical ally.
Both presidents hailed the new maritime agreement between Israel and Lebanon.
Tomorrow, Israel and Lebanon are going to sign an agreement to establish a permanent maritime boundary between your two countries. I think it's a historic breakthrough. It took a lot of courage for you to step up and step into it. It took some real guts, and I think it took principle and persistent diplomacy to get it done. And I compliment you, and I compliment the government.
I want to thank you, Mr. President, and the administration for moving forward and carving the deal between Israel and Lebanon on the maritime borders. And we appreciate the effort and of course, the bringing it to fruition tomorrow.
Leaving the White House, Herzog said the meeting focused on dangers posed by Iran. He also related to the issue of anti-Semitism.
We've discussed mainly the issue of Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapon, Iran's crush of its own citizens in a brutal, vicious, and malicious way, and Iran's activities in supplying armaments that are killing innocent Ukrainian citizens. We've discussed the issue of anti-Semitism. It's a major issue which we see as a main challenge in various frontiers all over the world. Clearly, as the nation state of the Jewish people, we care for our brothers and sisters all over the world. Toda rabba, and thank you very much.
Shortly after leaving the White House, President Herzog gave an exclusive interview in which he tried to explain Israeli policy on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Herzog also commented on his talks with Biden about U.S. anti-Semitism in general and Kanye West in particular.
Am I right in hearing you say your strategic limitations will prevent Israel from providing these air defense systems that the Ukrainians are begging you for?
Depends which air defense systems.
Well, which ones are you prepared to provide?
Well, I'm not going to negotiate with you. Let's first put things in perspective. There are weapons that the American administration is not supplying to Ukraine. There are weapons that Europe is not supplying to Ukraine. On the other hand, there's a lot of issues and things that can be supplied to Ukraine. We identify with the suffering of the Ukrainian people. We want this havoc to end. We want to find solutions to end this conflict. And definitely we support the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So as far as we can go in many non-lethal products, we can do.
Ukrainian President Zelensky has given an indication that Israeli policy on the war with Russia is finally changing for the better. ILTV's Kayla Ebelin with more.
After his country received intelligence from Israel about Iranian drones operated to deadly effect by the Russian army, Zelensky said that he is finally seeing a positive trend in Kiev's relations with Israel. This week, the two countries shared intelligence about 400 Iranian drones that Russia has used in its invasion. Ukraine has been frustrated with Israel's refusal to supply it with weapons, while Israel remains apprehensive about harming ties with Russia, who have a large military presence in Syria. Zelensky said that Israel can be doing more.
Я скажу вам чесно, я задоволений останніми днями, ми почали працювати. Я не буду казати деталі, як почали працювати наші розвідки, але я просто хочу сказати, після великої паузи я бачу ці кроки вперед. Цього сьогодні замало. Я вважаю дійсно, що Ізраїль – держава, яка знає глибоко і в деталях, що таке війна, трагедія. І я думаю, повинні більш підтримувати Україну.